4 years ago, on a perfectly choreographed stage in Beijing, beneath the spectacle and symbolism of the Winter Olympics, something historic quietly unfolded, something that, at the time, very few people truly understood. But today, looking back, it feels like the opening scene of an entirely different world. When Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping stepped in front of the cameras that cold February day, they weren't simply signing a diplomatic declaration. They were announcing something much bigger, a manifesto, a statement aimed directly at the foundations of Western power. That was the moment they unveiled what they called a no-limits partnership. Two nuclear giants standing shoulder to shoulder, two leaders declaring that their alliance had no boundaries, no restrictions, and no expiration date. And the message was unmistakable. A challenge to Western dominance. Across the capitals of the world, from Washington to Brussels, a quiet tension settled in. Governments studied every word of the declaration. Intelligence agencies dissected every line. The West believed it. The generals inside the Kremlin believed it. And for a long time, the rest of the world believed it too. The narrative became simple and powerful. Russia and China were now inseparable. The rising power of the East would shield Moscow from whatever pressure the West could apply. For years, diplomats whispered a single assumption behind closed doors: China will never abandon Russia. No matter how hard the sanctions hit, no matter how intense the war becomes, Beijing will stand by Moscow. For the Kremlin, that belief became a source of confidence. For the rest of the world, it became a source of concern. But then came Munich, February 2026, gray winter skies hanging over Bavaria. Inside the quiet, heavily guarded halls of the Munich Security Conference, something happened that would shatter that legend forever. Because in those halls, the idea that China would always stand beside Russia quietly died. Welcome to JAFO World Brief Daily. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear isn't just another story about Ukraine or Russia. This is about something much bigger. It's about the quiet restructuring of global power. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. So let's begin with a moment historians may one day circle in red ink. February 13th, 2026. On the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference, China's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, sat down for a meeting with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha. On the surface, that might not sound dramatic. Diplomats meet constantly. Conversations happen all the time. But what emerged from that meeting sent shockwaves straight into Moscow. According to reporting by Sakyar Shao, Ukrainska Pravda. Ukraine announced that China had committed to providing Piskar an additional humanitarian energy assistance package to Kiev. Sybiha himself posted publicly about it. He thanked Beijing for its decision to send additional support to help Ukraine restore its damaged energy infrastructure. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry confirmed the announcement. It wasn't secret. It wasn't hidden behind diplomatic channels. It was done openly in Munich, in front of the entire world. For Moscow, the impact was devastating. Imagine a bunker-busting bomb dropped directly into the Kremlin's strategic planning room. Because to understand why this matters, you have to understand what Russia has been trying to do on the battlefield. For months, the Russian military has been executing a systematic campaign aimed at destroying Ukraine's energy grid. Transformer stations, power transmission lines, electrical substations. The logic behind it is brutally simple. If Ukrainian civilians are left freezing in the dark during winter, if electricity disappears and heating systems shut down, then political pressure inside Ukraine increases. The population becomes exhausted, the government becomes vulnerable, and eventually Kiev might be forced to negotiate. In Russian military thinking, winter itself becomes a weapon, General Winter fighting alongside General Putin. But now, suddenly, China steps into that equation, and China effectively says something remarkable. Whatever Russia destroys, we will help rebuild. Reports from Euromaidan Press show that China had already delivered 500 generators and 65 industrial transformers into Ukraine even before this latest package. Now Beijing is sending more. Larger equipment, more powerful infrastructure components, directly targeting the exact systems Russian missiles have been destroying. This isn't neutral aid. This isn't charity. This is the quiet sabotage of Russia's entire winter strategy, one generator at a time, and then something happened that made the situation even worse for Moscow. After the meeting, Ukraine's foreign minister made another announcement. He revealed that he had personally invited Wang Yi to visit Ukraine. And China's top diplomat yet accepted the invitation. Think about that for a moment. China's foreign minister potentially walking through Kyiv, walking through a city under Russian missile threat, standing there while air raid sirens echo in the background. If that visit happens, the symbolism will be enormous. Putin's narrative of global alliances would collapse in real time, broadcast live to the world. Now, before we go further, we need to acknowledge something important. China is not a naive peace broker. Not even close. Because while Beijing is sending generators to Ukraine with one hand, it has been supplying Russia with dual-use technologies with the other. Semiconductors, electronic components, industrial chips, the kinds of parts that end up inside Russian drones and weapon systems. Ukrainian forces have recovered those components directly from battlefield wreckage. Everyone knows this. The Russian Defense Ministry knows it. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry knows it. Western intelligence knows it. China has been playing both sides. This is Beijing's strategy in its purest form. Controlled chaos. Supply both sides. Maintain leverage over everyone. And never let anyone forget who controls the key supply chains. At the same Munich conference, another moment made the geopolitical picture even clearer. French President Emmanuel Macron delivered a speech that many analysts described as a diplomatic execution of Russia's current position. Macron argued that Russia has effectively become a vassal state, increasingly dependent on China rather than operating as an independent power. He described a Russia that is economically isolated and strategically reliant on Beijing. Those weren't the cautious words of a nervous European leader. They were the words of a continent that has started to regain confidence. And Europe's posture is changing rapidly. Germany's new chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has abandoned the cautious approach of previous governments. Standing beside UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and President Macron in Munich, he signaled something unmistakable. Europe is rearming. Defense budgets are rising across the continent at speeds not seen since the Cold War. The European bloc is consolidating, and Beijing is watching all of this carefully. Because Xi Jinping is no longer looking at a divided Europe. He's looking at a stronger, more unified Western alliance. But the deepest shift may not be political. It may be economic. And this is where the numbers start telling a brutal story. In 2025, total trade between Russia and China dropped to about $228 billion. A decline of roughly 6.9% from the previous year. That might sound small, but it was the first decline since 2020. After 4 years of explosive growth, the partnership hit a wall, and the reason reveals something uncomfortable for Moscow. China is still buying Russian oil, but it's paying far less for it. The value of Russian crude sold to China dropped nearly 20% EY in 2025 because Beijing is demanding deep discounts, more than $11 per barrel below global benchmark prices. Russia is not negotiating from strength. Russia is liquidating its most valuable resource just to keep its war economy alive. And China knows Moscow has nowhere else to go. Around 80% of Russian oil exports now go to just two countries, China and India. But India has already begun reducing purchases, which leaves China holding nearly all the leverage. And Beijing is using that leverage ruthlessly. Russia cannot walk away. It cannot threaten. It can only accept the price offered. And while Russia grows weaker, China is expanding quietly in places few people are paying attention to. The Arctic, once considered Russia's strategic fortress, now increasingly becoming a Chinese logistics corridor. Satellite data suggests China's icebreaker fleet and shipping infrastructure are positioning themselves not as guests in the Arctic, but as operators. Russia's massive Arctic gas projects are stalling. Chinese financing now comes with conditions: Chinese technology, Chinese labor, Chinese control. The gas may still flow through Russian territory, but the economic architecture around it is slowly shifting into Beijing's hands. Meanwhile, on the ground in Siberia, another subtle transformation is happening. With large portions of Russia's military deployed in Ukraine, vast regions of the Russian Far East are now thinly defended. Chinese infrastructure teams and security contractors are appearing along key logistics corridors like the Trans-Siberian Railway. Officially, they are there for modernization projects, but strategically, they are filling the vacuum left behind. One logistics hub at a time, one checkpoint at a time. Does the Kremlin see this happening? Almost certainly. Russian intelligence services are not blind, but Moscow has a problem. It no longer has options. Russia has gone from strategic partner to economic dependency. And this is the great paradox of Putin's geopolitical gamble. The alliance that was meant to make Russia stronger has made it vulnerable. Xi Jinping didn't rescue Russia. He let Russia exhaust itself, and now Beijing is collecting the strategic benefits quietly, legally, without firing a single shot. But here's the critical twist. China cannot allow Russia to collapse because Beijing has its own strategic nightmare to consider: Taiwan. If China ever moves against Taiwan, it will face the largest economic blockade in modern history. And in that scenario, China would desperately need one thing: energy from Russia, oil, gas, grain, supplies that cannot be blocked by the U.S. Navy, which means Beijing needs Russia alive, but not strong, just functional enough, just dependent enough, just weak enough to follow China's lead. And that delicate balance is why the Munich moment matters so much. Because what happened there was not China choosing sides. It was China reminding Moscow who holds the leverage and reminding Europe that Beijing still wants a seat at the table. But history teaches us something dangerous about moments like this. Cornered powers do not always behave rationally. When national pride, humiliation, and survival collide, even powerful states can make unpredictable decisions. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes this story far from finished. Because the world that existed when Putin and Xi stood together in Beijing in 2022 is already gone. The No Limits partnership has turned into a relationship of dependency, and what replaces it will shape global politics for decades to come. We will continue to follow this story here on SAR-E World Brief Daily. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure you subscribe and share the video. And if you have thoughts or questions, leave them in the comments. We read every single one. Thanks for watching, and stay informed.